The African sun dipped low, casting long golden fingers over the endless savannah. The air shimmered with heat, and the distant cries of scavenger birds pierced the silence. But here, in the heart of Kopa's territory, there was only quiet. Too quiet. Ranger Daniel squinted from his perch atop the observation outpost. He'd worked these plains for over 15 years, long enough to know what silence meant, especially here. Kopa's domain had always been a cacophony of life, roaring lions, barking zebras, the low grumble of elephants in the dusk. But now, the wind blew over empty grasslands and the silence clung like a shroud. Kopa, the lion, was a legend, old now, but still feared. Stories passed between rangers and villagers alike, of his battles, his thunderous roar that once echoed across the valley. He bore scars from fights no one else survived. His pride had ruled with calm ferocity, maintaining balance in the ecosystem, until 3 weeks ago. The drone footage arrived that morning. Blurry infrared snapshots captured a lone figure limping through the canyon ridge. A tattered mane, the unmistakable gait, Kopa. But this wasn't just any place, it was the grave hollow. Daniel reviewed the coordinates again. The canyon was steeped in myth, a place animals instinctively avoided. Some called it a final resting place, others claimed it was cursed. No ranger ever found bones there, despite stories of animals going in to die. It was as if they simply vanished. Grabbing his field pack, Daniel moved quickly. If Kopa was heading into Grave Hollow, something was wrong. Old lions sought solitude before death, yes, but Kopa had never been ordinary, and his disappearance had coincided with strange patterns, shifting herds, predator migrations out of sync, watering holes left untouched. The ecosystem was unraveling. His boots crunched over dry earth as he followed the trail, stopping at a cracked patch of ground. Paws. Big ones. Blood dotted the soil. He knelt, brushing a finger across the smear. Still, fresh, he muttered. The canyon loomed ahead like a scar in the land, jagged and foreboding. Trees leaned away from it as if repelled. Birds circled far above but never descended. Daniel felt a chill beneath the sun's heat. He tightened the strap of his binoculars. Whatever was drawing Kopa into Grave Hollow wasn't natural, and Daniel wasn't about to let a king die alone. The sun dipped behind the distant acacia trees as Ranger Daniel moved deeper into the savannah's forgotten paths, the air dry and heavy with heat. Each step crunched over brittle grass and cracked earth. The silence grew thicker, the kind that came not from peace, but absence. As he walked, memories stirred. 12 years ago, this same silence had nearly killed him. Young and impulsive then, Daniel had been tracking a lion reported near the village outskirts. He'd broken protocol, went in alone. Through a tangle of brush, he'd come face to face with a lion, golden eyes blazing, mane flared with youth and strength. They had locked eyes. Daniel had raised his rifle. The lion had roared, not in rage, but pain. It didn't lunge. It simply dared. Then turned and vanished into the wild. He had lived, and never understood why. Until months later, during an anti-poaching raid, they found a half-dead cub in a cage. Daniel had carried it out himself, wrapped in his jacket, listening to its labored breaths under a starless sky. The cub's tag read K02. He named him Kopa, hope, in a language spoken only in looks and instincts. Over the years, Daniel watched reports come in. Kopa had survived, thrived. Released back into the wild, he carved out territory not through brute force alone, but through presence. He protected orphaned cubs, shared kills with the weak, and kept the natural balance. A true king, and now that king was bleeding. Daniel knelt beside a fresh trail, prints deep, uneven. Drops of blood stained the dry soil, still wet in the heat. Overhead, vultures circled in wide, patient spirals. He scanned the horizon. Hyenas loitered at a distance but made no move forward. A jackal froze near a bush, then turned away. Predators who should have been drawn in by the scent of weakness held back. It was as if, even in pain, Kopa's presence commanded reverence. Daniel stood slowly. Something wasn't right. Then it came, a deep guttural roar. Not a warning, not a call, something older, more primal. It rolled through the canyon ahead like thunder on stone. Daniel's blood ran cold. Kopa wasn't alone. He picked up his pace, heart pounding. Grave Hollow rose ahead, its walls jagged and ancient. The wind whispered through the rocks, but that wasn't what chilled him. It was the sense that something was waiting, and this time, Kopa might not walk away. The shadows of Grave Hollow stretched, like fingers across the earth as Ranger Daniel crept along the canyon path, heart pounding. Every step was slower now, each one a weight, pulling him deeper into a place where silence reigned. Then he heard it, a low, rumbling growl, followed by a guttural roar that stopped him cold. He broke into a sprint, slipping between narrow stone walls until he reached a clearing, bathed in the last light of day. What he saw stole the breath from his lungs. There stood Kopa, bloodied, ribs heaving, mane tangled with dirt and scarlet. He faced a towering beast of muscle and rage. Zarok, the exiled lion, thought dead. Larger than Kopa, with a dark mane and eyes like burning coals, Zarok was infamous, a rogue who slaughtered alphas, raised prides, and brought chaos wherever he tread. Now he had returned. For Kopa's land, for his legacy. Daniel froze behind a rock outcropping, too close to flee, too helpless to intervene. His rifle hung useless at his side, no match for what stood before him. Kopa didn't back down. The two lions circled, growls, echoing like thunder through the canyon. Kopa's left hind leg dragged slightly, already wounded, bleeding from a previous fight. Yet in his eyes was fire, memory, defiance. Zarok lunged first. Claws met flesh. Kopa rolled, dodged, roared back. Dust exploded beneath them as they clashed. Old strength against ruthless power. Then came the roar. Kopa reared back, and from deep within his chest summoned one final cry. A sound so raw and ancient it shook the canyon. Birds exploded into flight above. Even Zarok faltered. Daniel stumbled, the sheer force of it pressing tears into his eyes. He had never heard anything like it. Not rage, not fear, but farewell. Kopa charged. With all the strength left in his body, he met Zarok head-on. The two collided near the cliff's edge, legs tangling, jaws snapping, a final push, a desperate leap, and then they fell. Both lions disappeared over the edge in a flurry of dust and silence. Daniel dashed forward, skidding to his knees at the canyon rim. Far below, jagged rocks glinted in the gloom. Blood marked the stone, but no movement, no sound, only wind. He stared, hands gripping the earth, breath caught between disbelief and grief. Kopa. The name fell from his lips like a prayer. He had watched him grow, watched him lead, and now watched him fall. But he hadn't fallen in defeat. He had chosen. Daniel bowed his head, not in mourning, but in reverence. The king had given everything, for the land, for balance, for peace. And now the silent territory echoed with the memory of his final roar. Night fell over the savannah like a slow breath, the stars emerging one by one in the inky sky. At base camp, Ranger Daniel sat alone by the fire, its crackling warmth doing little to cut the chill that gripped his chest. He hadn't spoken since returning from Grave Hollow. The image of Kopa's final stand replayed endlessly in his mind. The roar, the leap, the silence. A king choosing sacrifice over surrender. Daniel had left a marker at the cliff's edge, a stone stacked atop another, small but sacred. It was all he could give the lion who had once spared his life. Now only embers and memory remained. A beep broke the silence. The motion sensor camera had triggered. Daniel rose, brow furrowed, and walked to the monitoring screen inside the ranger tent. The timestamp blinked. Just minutes ago. The footage was grainy at first, a fixed shot near the Grave Hollow trail. Then movement. A shadow stepped into view, not a hyena, not a jackal. A young lion, maybe a year old, paused before the camera. Its coat was lighter than Kopa's, but the stance was unmistakable. Head high, eyes alert, muscles coiled, not with fear but with control, with presence. Daniel leaned closer. The cub looked directly into the lens. It wasn't lost. It wasn't wandering. It was watching him. Recognition prickled Daniel's spine. Could it be? A few seconds passed. Then, from the depths of the cub's chest came a sound, low, steady, rising. A roar, not playful, not unsure, powerful, and identical to Kopa's. Daniel staggered back, breath caught. His eyes welled, not with grief this time, but awe. Kopa had left more than a memory. He had left a future. Daniel sat slowly, staring at the frozen frame of the cub on the screen. His fingers hovered over the playback, but he didn't need to hear it again. He heard it already, in the wind, in the grass, in the stillness that followed greatness. He remembered the moment Kopa had spared him all those years ago. A decision made in pain, not anger. Mercy over instinct. That act had echoed across time, across bloodlines. This cub was living proof. Nature, Daniel realized, wasn't just survival of the strongest. It was survival of the wisest, the kindest, the ones who chose balance over brutality. It was legacy. The fire outside flickered. In the distance, a second roar answered the first. The circle was not broken. It was beginning again. The dawn broke quiet over the savannah. The sky painted in muted gold and rose. Ranger Daniel sat beneath the canvas awning of his camp, pen in. Hand journal open to a fresh page. The fire beside him had burned low, its last embers flickering like fading stars. He wrote slowly, deliberately, "A lion died today, but a kingdom rose again." The words felt right, final, and yet eternal. Later that morning, Daniel returned to Grave Hollow. He climbed to the cliff's edge, the place where Kopa had made his final stand. With care, he anchored a hand-carved plaque into the red earth. Kopa, the lion who roared even in Death Protector. King. Legend. He stood in silence, letting the wind carry his thoughts into the canyon. The savannah below stretched endlessly, but the absence of one lion had changed it forever. Word spread quickly. Through the ranger stations, footage from Daniel's camera was shared across the reserve. Biologists, conservationists, and even those who had never stepped foot on African soil watched the final moments in reverent silence. Kopa was no longer just a lion. He was a symbol of balance, of sacrifice, of what nature could be if protected and respected. Seasons passed. And then, one evening, just as the rains were returning, Daniel stood on a distant ridge, binoculars in hand. The sky was bruised with thunderclouds. Lightning flickered at the horizon. There, on the hilltop once ruled by Kopa, stood the young lion. Older now, stronger, his frame lean but solid. The cub no more. He lifted his head and roared. The sound was fierce, full of life. It rolled through the valley like a promise, shaking trees and scattering birds. It was not only a declaration, it was a continuation. From afar, Daniel lowered the binoculars, eyes misty. He smiled, voice barely a whisper. "Roar." And King the Thunder answered, and the legend lived on.